Hi, this is Kevin Smith. I am the Director of Product Development at PersonalFinanceLab, and in this webinar, I'm going to talk about how to use the budget game in your classes. I'm going to cover how the game works. I'm going to cover some of the key learning takeaways. I'm going to cover some specific points that you should be highlighting in your class, both for grading and for class discussion, and highlighting some of the key transitions that students are going to take at certain points of the game so you can highlight those in your class. So first, about the budget game. So in the PersonalFinanceLab budget game, in most scenarios, your student is going to start by taking on the role of a college student with a part-time job. They have roommates, so they're going to be managing the shared expenses of a household for the first part of the game. Partway through the game, they graduate from college and they become a full-time worker with a 40-hour work week with more consistent income, but also much bigger expenses because they no longer have roommates. Throughout the game, the management is on managing cash flow. So it's not necessarily where they need to start building a budget in Excel and breaking all their expenses down, but it's more about how can they actually control their spending and manage their income to make sure that they can reinforce a pay yourself first saving strategy. So really not so much about just filling in cells in a spreadsheet as much as really building healthy financial habits over the course of their financial life. So throughout the game, the students have 5 major objectives, and these all get put together in what we call our overall score. The first one that students are going to get hit with first is building their emergency fund. Every student's first major goal is to save at least $1,000 in their emergency fund. They do that by transferring money from their checking account to their savings account. Doing so earns them a huge bonus. So students who fill up their emergency funds first get a huge boost in their class rankings. The second is their credit score. So every student gets a credit card in the budget game, and it is up to them to use this credit card responsibly. Using the credit card responsibly means that they need to use it, so they need to make some purchase on their credit card, but they shouldn't ever use more than half of their credit limit. If they use more than half of their credit limit, they start losing points to their credit score every day. So they really want to avoid that. But if they use their credit card responsibly, making certain purchases but not overdoing it, then their credit score goes up and their credit limit goes up, making it even easier to stay within healthy credit limits over time. Third is savings goals. Every month of the budget game, students are asked to set a savings goal. We give the most points to students who set a savings goal of at least 10% of their income and hit it. So setting a savings goal is one thing, making sure they actually hit that goal is another. So leveraging their credit cards, leveraging their income, leveraging opportunities to earn some extra cash, all those go together into achieving their savings goal, which really is more about their income than their expenses. Fourth is quality of life. Now this is something that's unique to our budgeting game. Students can't win the game just by avoiding every single expense. There is something to be said for quality of life, where students who spend a little bit more time with their friends and family, who spend a little bit of money on some luxuries when it's applicable, are tending to be happier. So if a student has already met their savings goal for this month, we do award extra points if they spend some time on themselves for quality of life. And last is their life balance. Students have options of how they can spend their time throughout the game. Studying, working extra hours for some more income, working on their household chores, or just spending time with friends. And there's pluses and minuses to each of these options. Generally speaking, the students who do the best kind of spend their time equally between each option depending on how the game plays out for them. But how each student chooses to spend their time throughout the game plays a big impact. If they lean too hard into one or another, they're probably going to start losing points. Now, as a teacher, when you launch the game, you're going to want to kick off with a prompt. The students really kind of understand what they're doing. You, for example, you're going to be basically saying what I have written here. You are taking on the role of a college student in their last semester. You have a part-time job, and you are sharing an apartment with your roommates. You'll earn a paycheck each week, have bills to pay, and a credit card that you can use, while your goal is to build up your emergency fund and credit score while maintaining a high quality of life. After you graduate from school, you'll move on to a new apartment on your own and start your full-time job. You'll have bigger and more bills and also a bigger, steady paycheck, keeping your savings goal and keep high credit score and high quality of life to max out your financial future. Now this is important because it helps students understand what they're doing. Really what they're doing in the game is they're moving through time. And they need to understand that in each of these transition periods from a student to a worker, there's a lot of differences they need to be able to take into account. Now, when your students start the game, the first real learning point that they're going to experience is planning for the unplanned expenses. We give the students a breakdown right off the bat of what they can expect for all their bills. We're not going to hide how much they're going to pay for rent or how much they're going to spend for gas on their car each month. That part is pretty, we make that pretty obvious. But the real learning exercise is they need to estimate how much they're going to spend on their other unplanned expenses. The line items that aren't on their budget. How often are you going to go out for dinner? How often are you going to have to buy new clothes? All the other little things that tend to add up over time. For the first month of the game, this is really going to be a pure guess on the part of your students. But after the students have played a month or two, they're going to see how these really start to add up throughout the game. This is a key learning point. Being able to plan for these unplanned expenses makes students realize that this is not just something you can write off. It ends up being a very large chunk of the money spent. And so they need to understand how much money that is and be able to plan for it in their budgets. The second point, when students start the game, is that they need to set their monthly savings goal right off the bat. The real secret here is that in the Personal Finance Lab budget game, we don't care what their expenses are. If they have very high expenses some month and low income, it doesn't matter. We really try to reinforce the pay yourself first saving strategy. So students who set a savings goal of 10% of their total net income and hit that goal are going to get the most points. If students set a lower goal and hit it, they'll still get some points. If they miss their goal, if they set a goal and just don't hit it, then we don't give them any points at all. So it really is all about goal setting, and hitting those goals is the students who are going to do the best in the class rankings. And last, when students start the game, they're going to have a few different options of what they're going to do for their regular recurring expenses. So where are they going to live? Are they going to live in a cramped up place with 5 roommates, or just a nicer 2-bedroom apartment with one friend and share the rent? What kind of TV package, cell phone plan? What's the kind of food plan are they doing? So choosing these expenses is a direct trade-off between how easy do you want to be on your budget and how much do you want to focus on your quality of life. There's a bunch of different ways for students to earn quality of life points in the game, but this is by far the most obvious. Students who go for the nicer options for their recurring expenses are going to get more quality of life points because they made their life easier. And these choices build up a lot over time. Students can change them. You can get a different apartment midway through the semester if you want to, but you're going to have to pay a lease break fee. You can change your cell phone plan, but you might have to pay a fee to terminate your contract. They can change their diet any time, so that's fine. If they can just start shopping at a different place for groceries without any penalty. So once the students actually start the game, there is an important discussion point to have with your class. Every student has different randomized life events that occur through the game. So the biggest class discussion you can have about this is what are the different expenses that each student faces each month. One student is going to get an expense that all the other students didn't get. Use that as a launching point to have students talk about how often they expect these kinds of expenses to happen in the real world. How much would this actually impact you? So actually, as they're playing through the game in the first month, they're going to see a bunch of different life events. There's a few different ones that I'm going to highlight just so you understand where this is coming from a teacher. The first thing they're going to see is one of these green lesson cards. So in this case, we're asking the students how long it's going to take them to pay off a credit card. So really, we have a bunch of these lessons built into the game that talk about key personal finance topics. For the first 2 or 3 months of the game, they're really essential topics to the game itself. So understanding their credit card, understanding their emergency fund, understanding the pay yourself first saving strategy. As the game goes on, they become a little bit more generic to general personal finance topics, but they usually still tie back to the game in some way. Each lesson has a short quiz, and it gives the answer to the quiz in the lesson. That way the students can enter the amount to continue the game. Otherwise, at the end of each dice roll, so the students roll a die, at the end of each turn they get a life event. There's 2 major types of life events. There's fixed expenses or income, which is just something that happens. They don't get a choice in it. They can just choose are they going to pay this with their debit card or credit card. But sometimes they actually do have a choice involved. It's either a buy or skip, so they have an expense that they can take or not take, or it might be a choice between two alternatives. These choice cards, not only is it about their budgeting and how they want to spend their money, but it has a big impact on their quality of life. So taking the more expensive option usually gives them a lot more points to their quality of life. Throughout the game, these choices matter. It's not just a one-time expense they can take or not take. Each choice a student makes in the game is saved in the system, and it applies to all the other life events that pop up throughout the game. So for example, a student who chooses not to take renter's insurance, there's a chance each month that they're going to have a break-in, and if they have renter's insurance, that will cover the break-in. They'll be fine. If they don't have renter's insurance, they're going to be out several $100s that they have to pay. The same thing goes for high quality versus low quality cheap goods for some options they have. So as they're making these choices throughout the game, this is another really important class discussion point of what happened to you this month and what did you do before that had an impact on this? What would you have changed to make this outcome better? Both in the class discussion, because every student's going to give different events throughout the game, and just in general, when you're following up with students, they can give a recap of what worked well and what they would have changed if they could have. Now, at the end of the first month, the students get a summary of their saving and spending, along with their progress towards their savings goal. Like I said before, if they hit their savings goal of 10% or more of their income, they get big points. So generally speaking, the students who are going to be doing the best, who are at the top of your class rankings, are going to put a lot of money into their savings in their first month, as much as they can, to build up their emergency fund. And then every month afterwards, they're going to save 10% of their income. Anything they have extra beyond 10%, they should be spending. They should be focusing on their quality of life, building themselves up. Generally speaking, if someone is saving every possible penny, that's not necessarily a great way to live one's life. And that's not the kind of lesson that we're trying to teach. Now, as our first teacher tip, this is really important. When you have your class start the budget game, try to have them do it all at once. That way you get that scenario at the beginning where you can present it to your class. And you can have your students go through all of the first month together and have a discussion at the end of what went well, what went poorly for everyone in the class. This gives them a lot more opportunity to learn from each other, learn from their mistakes, and not just skip through the next month without really learning anything. The first month is really crucial, so ideally you'd be able to do this with your entire class all in one sitting. It should take only about 20-25 minutes. The most frequent question we get from teachers is, how do I do an assessment? How do I assess my students' performance in the budget game? And really it becomes more of an art than a science, because the budget game itself is based on a lot of random event. So it's not like you can just say the students who have a higher net worth or just did better. That's not necessarily the case. But what you should do is have your students write down every month a summary of what went well, what went wrong, and what they would fix, and what they would just do again if they could. The importance here is for them to have a plan to improve what they're going to be doing further on in the game. Now, if you want a true assessment with something self-graded, PersonalFinanceLab has its assignments built into it. These are lessons that are on the side of the budget game. They appear on the right side of the page. And most teachers can configure which lessons appear for their students, and they have automatically graded quizzes built into them. And the teachers can see both what students have finished which quizzes and what grades they got on them. So this works as a very effective way to have an assessment for your students. So after the first month, your students can kind of more go out on their own. Their goals are to build, like I said before, build up their credit score and emergency fund and learn all the lessons that we have built in on the way. We recommend keeping students paced by making sure that your class completes its assignments and the quizzes rather than just sitting for an hour and playing the budget game straight. And a lot of students are going to want to do that because the budget game can be quite engaging. But put some emphasis on the assignments, otherwise you're going to have some students who tend to get ahead of the class, which means they're going to finish before everybody else too. Which gets to our rankings, which is one of the big reasons why the students tend to get ahead of it. The budget game has 4 different types of rankings. The first is by overall score, which is a metric that is based on the general, how well have these students been following good personal finance recommendations. The second is net worth. Now, net worth is not actually figured into any of the scores in the game, but a lot of students just want to see how they're doing in terms of their net worth compared to the rest of the class. And so we have that available too. Third is by credit score. Now, credit score is not necessarily a ranking the students are going to be looking for to begin with, but it's a ranking that you as the teacher should be putting a lot of emphasis on. As a teacher, you can reach out to the students who have the highest credit score and ask how you did that, and conversely, you can talk with the students with the lowest credit score and figure out what's going wrong. So try to follow up with the credit score of your class regularly. That way you can make sure all of your students are on the right track. And quality of life. So the students who are living large, they're going to be at the top of the quality of life rankings. So the students who are being very austere, they're going to be at the bottom of the quality of life rankings. The students who are at the very bottom of the quality of life rankings, you might want to follow up with and making sure that they're not trying to just max out their net worth, because that's not where the overall score comes from. And give some emphasis to the rankings. Talk to your students about who's at the top of the rankings and the bottom of the rankings of every list. This is a really good launching point for your class discussion of who's doing well, who's doing poorly, and what we can do to get everybody on the same page. Now, partway through the game, your students are going to graduate from their part-time job as a college student, and they're going to start their full-time job. This is a transition phase in the game. The students are going to need to pick a new place to live and a bunch of other settings because they're no longer going to have roommates, and they now have a consistent 40-hour per week salary at a higher pay grade. So they get more pay, they get more consistent pay, but they also have a lot bigger expenses they need to manage. And this is a key learning point that not every student is going to catch, so you as a teacher really need to be aware of it. The students who studied a lot when they were a student working, they are going to have a bigger salary when they start their job. So this is a big emphasis early on in the game for the students who are spending a lot of time studying. It gives them a boost in their salary when they start. So this is a key learning point to focus on to your students in general. Study hard because that will lead to higher incomes later, all else equal. So some other differences you need to watch out for in the full-time mode, there's bigger bills. So the students don't have roommates, so their bills go up. Bigger paychecks. In the part-time mode, the students have random hours between, I believe, 14 and 30 hours a week that they can get. But when they are in full-time mode, they have a standard 40-hour-a-week paycheck. Professional development. So when students are in part-time mode, they have an option of 4 different things they can do each weekend, one of which is studying. In full-time mode, this switches to conducting professional development, so getting extra certifications or spending time learning new skills. This also counts towards getting a raise at their job. So students who do a lot of professional development will also get raises and get more income than the rest of the students. And they get new bills. In full-time mode, students have both a student loan and a health insurance bill they need to pay every month. So this is another reason why they get more income, but there's a lot more responsibilities they need to watch out for. This is a key learning point. So the professional development and studying are the same in our back end. So a student who studied a lot and a student who does a lot of professional development both get raises and they get more income than the rest of the students. So we try to reinforce the concept of lifetime learning. Especially in 21st century skills, lifetime learning is more important than ever. And so we're always emphasizing that students should be looking out for opportunities for professional development to get a raise at their job. Other differences to watch out for and other differences to highlight to your class is that when they're in full-time mode, they're going to be faced with even more challenges with even bigger impacts. As soon after they get a full-time job, they're going to have an opportunity to get a pet, a cat or a dog. If they get a pet, they're going to get a bunch of new bills. Their grocery store bill is going to go up a little bit to cover the pet expenses, and they're also going to have the opportunity to get vet bills as part of their life events. But because they have a pet, they also get a big boost to their quality of life, so there are costs and benefits of each option. We also have a lot more emphasis on general household expenses, insurance, and general adulting expenses. So the kinds of things that a part-time college student wouldn't expect, but as we all know, a real person who has their own place to live are going to be faced with every day. More chores, more work to do, more paperwork, just more everything. And a key learning point throughout the game is that as students complete their first 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, and farther, most of the healthy financial habits should become second nature. So as a teacher, you should be keeping an eye on the rankings page and see any students who seem to be falling behind. Ask them why, what's been going well, what's been going poorly. That way you can start correcting those behaviors and they can reinforce them as they play through this game. After 12 months, how many students have maxed out their credit score? It maxes out in our game at 840. Talk to the students at the top of the class and the bottom of the class about what they did right, what they did wrong, and what the importance it is of establishing these healthy habits early. Because if they get a high credit score early in the game, it makes the rest of the game so much easier because they have a high credit limit. If they have a month where they have very high expenses, they can cover that and pay it off over the months coming forward. If they still are stuck with a $250 credit limit, there's not very much flexibility they get. But in general, a lot of the learning points of the budget game come from class discussion. They come from using the assignments built into it, so you have some assessments that you can grade students on. And they come from the class rankings. So make sure you're aware of some of these key transitions that take place. Make sure you're aware of some of these questions that students are going to be asking and what the key learning takeaways are at some of the key points of the game. If you have any questions, you can talk to us and get some more information or ideas of running your class. You can reach us at info@PersonalFinanceLab.com, or we have a live chat built in for most teachers right in the budget game page. So if you have any questions, my name is Kevin Smith. You can reach me at kevin@PersonalFinanceLab.com, and I look forward to serving your classes soon.